Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Justin, and in today's video we're going to discuss the parts, the plans, a rough estimate about what we're going to do with the S50 motor inside of the E36 M3. So a couple of things. I noticed that some of the coolant that I had siphoned out of the expansion tank before I did that install was collected in a couple of water bottles. I'll show you guys what it kind of actually looks like right now. This is what the coolant actually looks like when it was sitting for a couple of days. Yeah, I'm not surprised that it's the head gasket. So this is what it looks like. You know when they ever say when you open up your oil filler cap to check for milky substance to make sure that you don't have a blown head gasket? Well, this is what it looks like. It's been sitting in these water bottles, empty water bottles. You can see there's like that brown milky substance at the very top. Here's another bottle here. You can kind of see it at the top right there. This is not what coolant is supposed to look like. There's a little mini bottle right here. You can kind of see it all frothy at the top. So it kind of looks like a dirty milkshake. But needless to say, it looks like it is a blown head gasket. So as you guys can see from those water bottles, it's a pretty clear indication that we're mixing coolant with oil, which would kind of coincide with what my mechanic shop was saying about exhaust gases getting into the cooling system. So we know for a fact that they're mixing, something's going on there. Fingers crossed. I'm hoping that it's just a head gasket. He hasn't cracked it open yet, but hopefully we'll get to find that out pretty soon. What I've been doing in the last week has been doing some research as far as the specific parts that I want to be putting into the car. So I'm pretty dead set on obviously building the head. I'm also leaning towards building the block as well. If we're doing an engine rebuild on the head and the car has about 173,000 miles, I think just for the peace of mind, I would rather go ahead and do work on the block as well. I do realize it's going to cost more in terms of labor because they got to drop the motor, but you have to also realize that this is 173,000 miles. I don't know the current status of the pistons, the rings that go along with that. And on top of that, I also want to up the boost. So I really think it would just be a better idea just for my own peace of mind to get some better internals for the block. That way we know that even though we might be doing overkill, I'd rather do some overkill to give myself better peace of mind knowing that the engine can take whatever I throw at it. So that's kind of what my plans are moving forward. Well, before I get into any of the parts or the cost of any of this, how I'm gonna estimate this is I'm gonna take the price of the parts, add them up together. I'm gonna add tax on top of that, and then I'm gonna add a miscellaneous area because we all know when you work on cars, miscellaneous costs pop up, and I'll explain to you how I'm gonna calculate that later in the video. Now, this is the area, guys, where things kind of get a little foggy. I am not a professional engine builder. I am simply looking up the parts and trying to get a rough estimate as to how much things are gonna cost and where it's gonna place me in terms of my budget. So take that with a grain of salt, okay? Some of these parts, I don't even know if they're completely compatible, but like I said, I'm doing my own research and I'm leaving a lot of this to the professionals, AKA my mechanic shop, to determine which parts work best together, what will gel together, and what will maximize the durability, the reliability, and give me some power. So starting off, I'm looking at some Schritt cams, camshafts to be putting in the car. Specifically, we're looking at 264, 256 intake exhaust cams. These are pretty well-known cams that are being used in the E36 motors. In terms of street and trackability, these are pretty well known. They're pretty strong cams. They're not super aggressive, so you're not gonna get that lope in idle, but it's definitely gonna help out in low-end torque. I've already reached out to my tuner and he said that this is gonna help the car breathe a little easier too. So that's something that I'm definitely looking at. Cost for that Schritt camshaft set is gonna run us about 1,170 bucks. Next up, we have the Supertech Valve Spring Kit. We're gonna go ahead and replace the valve springs along with the camshafts. It's not completely necessary to change out the valve springs, but it's just an extra added measure for insurance. Last thing you want is for your valve to punch against the piston, so the springs are kind of there to help prevent that. So Supertech is a pretty well-known brand. I did some research on them. A lot of people seem to be using them. The SpringTech Valve Spring Kit will run us about 675 bucks. Next up, we have the Supertech Valve Kit. So along with our valve springs, I plan on getting new valves. This is gonna run us about $550. The valves that come from Supertech are pretty well known. Supertech Valve Kit, 550 bucks. Next up, we also have our BMW lifters. I'm gonna go ahead and just go with the hydraulic OE lifters that come stock on the car. I know some people use solid lifters, but this is not a dedicated race car, so I think it's better to just kind of keep it the way it is. So we're just gonna go ahead and be boring and stick with OE lifters for the car. So the BMW OE lifters is $25 a piece. We're gonna need 24 of them, so that's gonna be about 600 bucks. Next up, we have our valve cover gasket. Nothing special here, it's a valve cover gasket. That's gonna run us about $25. And now we get to the fun parts of the block. So for the block, we're running forged JE pistons and eagle rods. This is a combo deal. Looking up these brands for pistons, JE is a pretty well-known brand, and eagle rods as well. A lot of people have paired these two on the BMW forums. This combination kit also comes with ARP rod bolts, as well as our ring set for the pistons. This looks pretty good. I think we're gonna be running with these brands. Pretty well known. And I think this is gonna lower our compression a bit. It looks like it's gonna go to a 9:0 compression ratio. So that's pretty good if we wanna up the boost. The price is about $1,405. Next up, we've got our rod bearings. So the rod bearings, nothing too special here. These are WPC treated bearings. The set's gonna run us about $105. Next up, we have our VAC Motorsports cut ring head gasket. Because the main problem with the car is the head gasket issue that we were facing, I did so much research in terms of the materials that can go into a head gasket, the types of head gaskets, what works best with what, and I think I'm pretty much sold on the cut ring head gaskets. We have like composite head gaskets, which is I believe the stock head gasket that came on the car. Then you have an MLS head gasket, which is a multi-layer steel. And then you have a cut ring gasket, which is basically a cut ring that goes in between the head and the block. It basically cuts into the head to prevent any gases from escaping, and it creates a really good seal so it doesn't leak. And the material around it, I believe, is a composite material. I was actually looking into getting a multi-layer steel MLS head gasket, but there tends to be leaks associated with those if there's not a flat enough surface for the head or the block, which I really shouldn't be worrying about, because if we're going to be setting the block and the head to a machine shop, they should make sure that everything's nice and flat before we install anything. From the reviews that I've read, the cut ring head gaskets are really hard to beat because it does have that metal ring that goes around, and it technically cuts into the head a little bit to seal everything in place. And I think that's just a really, really good peace of mind insurance kind of deal. These cut rings aren't cheap though. A typical, I think, MLS head gasket's anywhere between 100 and 150 bucks. The cut ring is about $250. So we're gonna go ahead and roll with the cut ring. That's gonna cost us about 250 bucks. Lastly, we have our crank pulley. Currently we have a 6 rib by, I believe it's by 5.25 inches crank pulley for the supercharger. I want to up the boost, so the best way of doing that is to actually increase the diameter of the crank pulley. We've already decreased the diameter of the supercharger pulley, and that's increased the boost quite a bit. I think we're running at 10.5 psi right now. I know with a 6-inch crank pulley and a 3.33 inch supercharger pulley, that puts you at about, I think, 11 psi. Our pulley right now, I think on the supercharger is 2.9-ish, somewhere around there. So with this crank pulley on there, we might be seeing upwards of more than 14 psi. Sounds pretty good, but I want to be kind of conservative as well. I don't really want to be pushing higher than that, but I don't know, we'll see. So this crank pulley is going to get us to around $400. So the parts itself is going to cost us about $5,180 before taxes. After taxes is going to be about $5,635. And remember earlier I was saying we're going to try to give us a little more headroom in terms of miscellaneous parts. Of course, when you open up the engine, there's going to be things that need to be replaced. So I'm talking about like timing chain tensioners, timing chain, seals, gaskets. Also, you got to take into consideration your oil, your coolant, your fluids, all that good stuff. So we're flexing up. We're going to go 20% additional on top of the $5,635 for parts, which puts us at $6,765 just on parts for the head and the block. Of course, we have the machine shop work. I'm guesstimating that to be at about $750 on the low end, $1,500 on the high end. Labor, this is a tricky one. I've done some Google research, and a lot of people a lot of people have different opinions on this or stating different things. I don't know if they're considering head and block work, but I've seen people say labor can be 10 to 20 hours. I don't necessarily think that's enough time, but then again, I've never torn apart an engine before. So what I did was I put a low end and a high end. So on the labor hours, at let's say average $125 an hour for 20 hours, labor is going to cost about $2,500. $125 an hour for, I'm gonna overestimate this to 50 hours, it's gonna cost about $6,250. So now here we are at the very end. So we have two different estimates. I've got a low end and a high end, and I'm thinking that the actual estimate's gonna fall somewhere in between. So on the low end, total cost for the engine rebuild and the labor and the machine shop work is gonna be $10,015 or $10,015. And on the high end, $14,515. So if we're averaging that, this is gonna be somewhere like $12,300 at the end of the day.
Oh my God. I am never gonna financially recover from this.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. But you know, I have a budget for the car, and luckily this falls within that budget. These are most of the major parts. I'm 100% positive that I've missed things out here. I've never pulled an engine. I have never opened up an engine other than like a valve cover gasket before. So I'm sure there's a lot of things that go into this in terms of parts and labor that I haven't taken into consideration, but that's just something to look out for. Now, I will say I have looked up E-rod engines. If you don't know what an E-rod engine is, an E-rod engine is a carb legal engine that's basically a crate motor. Interestingly enough, an E-rod engine exists for the LS3. You can get an LS3 motor that's carb legal, so you can drop it in any 95 or older car for about $9,700. It's got 430 horsepower and 425 foot-pounds of torque. That's a lot of American Eagles. It's crossed my mind to maybe look into this too. This is not exactly cheap. So for building up the engine and the labor associated with the S50 engine, it's gonna be probably averaging around $12,500, $12,300. Just for that E-rod motor, it's already $9,700, and that's not even taking into consideration the Tremec transmission you'd have to buy to pair it up with it. That's gonna cost at least another $4,000 on top of that. And then you have to buy the conversion kit or the mounting kit to drop an LS motor in E36. That's gonna cost at least another $2,000. So right there, you're already $17,000 in just parts alone. Great thought. It's a nice pipe dream. Oh, that would be so badass to have a V8 inside of an E36, but I don't know. Things can always change later down the road, guys, so we'll keep that in mind. But moving forward, I mean, my plan for the car right now is to basically have it built. We're upping the boost. It kind of makes sense that the car was running the way it was before the head gasket blew. I was running about 10.5 PSI. If you look at dyno number sheets online and on YouTube, some people are running 6.5 to 7 pounds of boost, and they're getting about 290 to the wheel. And that's just with the blower installed. So if I'm running 10.5 PSI, theoretically, I should be making well above 300 wheel horsepower. A lot of the cars that I ran were about 300 wheel horsepower, if not a little more. It was either neck and neck or they would win by a fender or two. So running 10.5 PSI in comparison to 7 PSI, I should be making considerably more amount of power. And if I'm hanging with these other cars who solidly make 300 wheel horsepower, then something's going on. Something's not making sense. I should be pulling harder than that. So that might be due to the loss of compression, the head gasket pretty much on its way out. I do remember when I first got the car, it felt like it pulled a lot harder than it does recently before the head gasket blew. So that's something to keep into consideration. Power-wise, when I got the supercharger installed, I was pretty happy shooting for 300 wheel horsepower. But now that the engine's gonna be built, we're gonna be putting a cam in there, we're gonna be upping the boost. I'm hoping to get around 400, anywhere between 400 to 430 wheel horsepower. That's going to be a riot to drive, especially in a car that weighs about 3,100 pounds. So I'm really excited for that. I really don't want to get ahead of myself. We have to take the engine apart first, make sure the head and the block look good. We got to make sure that our estimates stay within our budget, and pretty much plan for the future. Moving forward, I am going to order a part for the Supra. I feel like the Supra needs some love on the channel. I haven't been giving it too much love recently. E36 has pretty much been the star poster boy of the channel. So we're going to go ahead and get that taken care of. We'll order a part for the Supra. I'll keep you guys updated from time to time about the E36, what's going on. And hopefully we'll go from there. So anyways guys, that's pretty much it for today's video. I know this one might be a little short. I actually wasn't really planning on putting a video out this week, but because I've already been doing the research, I figured, hey, might as well take the time to tell you guys exactly what the plans are moving forward. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please hit that like button. If you want to subscribe, help me out, follow me on my channel. I build my E36 M3, I'm building my Supra, and on top of that too, I just attend a lot of local Sacramento events, car shows, car events, and things like that. So if you're around this area, feel free to follow me. If you see me out, say hi. Totally approachable. Don't ever not say hi. Anyways guys, that's pretty much it for today's video. Remember, respect your elders. Peace.